Today we're here with Mark Albert Plantsman, and he's going to show us how to do summer chip budding. Is that correct? Anything else it's called?
It's called chip budding. Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of different kinds of budding, but chip budding is a very specific, easier type of budding.
And the difference is that instead of taking just the bud and the cambium and the bark, you're taking a piece of wood and inserting it into the woody stem. Is that correct?
It's basically like a little tiny wedge graft.
Right.
That's really what it is.
But there's wood involved versus a
There-
regular bud, which is just more of a slip of bark.
Quite often they will actually pull the wood out of the bud.
Right.
Yeah, because so the problem is, talking about a tea bud. The tea
budding,
bud
right.
is where you're actually inserting the bud underneath against the inner wood, and so you have
Right.
to actually open up
Right.
the stem,
You put it under the bark.
put it under the bark. You have
Right.
to lift the bark.
So what we're doing today is we're taking a piece of wood off of one piece, and we're taking an equivalent piece of wood off of the stalk and just replacing it.
Yeah, so this you do not have to lift the bark.
Right.
And dur, which is like the latest propagation book. Chip budding appears to have the greatest relevance as a replacement for the conventional tea budding when the period of cambial activity is limited and the bark is not slipping. Well, what do you know? So under normal valley nursery conditions with constant watering and constant chemical fertilizing, the bark is slipping like crazy. But in every other situation, like our situation,
Right.
quite often the bark is not slipping.
And so with chip budding, you don't have to race to get your buds ready in time. Like by the time your buds are ready, the bark's not slipping anymore.
You can do it any time.
Okay.
Yeah, my friend Michael Maltas does chip budding at any time of year.
Okay.
He does it during winter budding too.
Yeah,
Winter
I've done it.
budding.
I've done
Instead of-
similar things during winter.
I've done a cherry bud that came, on a bare root tree in the mail and pulled the bud off of there and stuck it on and it went just fine. So yeah, it even replaces winter graft.
Right, and the almond
Once you get
stalk
good
I
at it.
just planted in a video, I did a similar thing, but instead I took like a half round piece of wood. Like say I cut a piece and I just split it in half, and then I took an equivalent piece out of the stalk and just stuck it in there.
Which is
Tied it.
essentially
Pretty much
the
the
idea
same.
of budding.
Yeah,
It
same.
doesn't have to be shaped just any particular way, just so it's shaped exactly the same way
Right,
on
if
both
you-
the stalk and the scion.
Right.
They just have to fit together. The cambiums have to line
Right.
up. That's
Good
just simple.
cambial contact.
You
That's
can
my,
you can invent any kind of grafting you want as long as the
yeah,
cambiums
that's
line
my
up.
take on it too. Okay.
Yeah.
So timing wise, what are we looking at? We're looking for.
So the
what-
beauty of
yeah.
budding, and especially of chip budding, because you don't have to worry about what condition the stalk is in. Otherwise, you have to worry about the condition of the stalk, and these are
Right.
a little stressed out. But the beauty of budding, summer budding, is it's kind of an instant gratification. As soon as you taste the peach, for instance, you can grab the wood right there and take it home and bud it. You don't have to wait and come back in the winter. The beauty of this particular method I'm teaching here in July is that we're using fresh wood, and we are going to push the bud on that wood, and it's going to grow 1 to 2 to 3 feet tall before the end of the season. So you have yourself a
Cool.
treat. If you didn't get it, you go to the science exchange and get a dormant one.
Right, or you can always let the stalk grow back, or who knows? You've got
can.
lots of options. It's not,
Yeah.
probably not going to die. So
Yeah, I have an example of an olive where you can see where my previous chip bud failed, but now there's a whole new stem for me to chip bud.
right, but I forgot your budwood. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Someday we'll get it. Chip budding is it's been around for a long time, but it's never been considered to be a really useful graft until the advent of parafilm. So parafilm and chip budding go hand in hand.
And what is parafilm?
Parafilm is this marvelous laboratory film that is a polyethylene, a waxed polyethylene is what it is. So it has a waxy aspect to it, and it also has a film aspect to it. And what it does is, as soon as you stretch it, it will stick to itself. So it's instant. So
but it won't stick to itself till you stretch it and break,
yes,
break
it
it open.
sticks. So it's flexible, moldable, self-sealing, odorless, moisture-resistant, thermoplastic, semi-transparent, and practically colorless. Wonderful stuff, used all in the laboratory for test tubes these days for the last 20 years. But then the agriculturalists found it was extremely useful for budding. So in the old days, you used to have to insert a bud underneath the bark. You needed to do that because you needed to protect the bud from the elements. So the advent of parafilm means that you can just slap the bud on the outside and get very quick.
Because once it's wrapped with that, it's
Once
not
it's
going to
wrapped,
dry.
it's like in a little greenhouse of its own. It's completely sealed from the elements.
And the bud can break the parafilm?
The bud goes right through the parafilm. It's extremely thin. Before, chip budding was used in the grape industry, and they would earth up around the chip. That in order to protect it from the environment, to keep it moist. Parafilm eliminates that earthing up business.
And why not just wrap it a little and then slap some graft seal on it, like duck farwells or something like that?
Farwells, you have the problem of it's a liquid and it can run down, which is and get into your chip, and you have to seal it first and then add the farwell. So liquid stuff has a little bit of a limitation in that regard. It can get into your graft union. I've scaled down my budding box. I've actually literally removed 80% of the tools, actually 90% of the tools, because some of them are just here for demonstration. Definitely cannot use a big old walnut knife for this kind of thing. I wouldn't even use a standard knife for this kind of thing. And the reason, because in a chip bud we actually have to make a curved cut. So this big flat surface gets in the way of your curved cut. The old budding knife can be used for that, because notice how thin it is up here.
Oh yeah.
It's very thin here, and all you're doing is cutting just right here. And so you can get a curve on it. The other thing I like is just the little 9mm snap blade knives. They work just fine. You don't need a big thick knife to cut a chip bud. You're just making one cut on each stalk, and they line up. This is very elegant, simple. You don't need big tools. You don't need special tools. All you need is a thin knife. It's not very wide, and some parafilm. I have some yesterday's brand new cut peach wood. This is a seedling of a blood peach that's very famous in Ukiah.
I want some of that.
Yeah, you want some of that.
Leaf curl resistant, right?
Yes. This is Antonio's yellow peach seedling. So I wanted Antonio's peach, and so I went and saw the peaches on the tree. I know exactly what I'm getting. I grabbed the sticks that I want, which were the way up high. This growth was way up high. Here I brought one. This is basically, we're talking about a really leafy brand new stem here. This is all of this year's growth.
Current year's growth.
This is not last year's growth. All this grew this year. And what you're looking for is basically usually the bottom third. And the reason you want the bottom third is because even though this is only a couple of months old, basically it's mature enough so that when you cut with a blade, you will not damage the tissue. So if you cut too soft a tissue, you just kind of wreck it. It doesn't cut. It's not quite woody enough. So this is the leafy one that I didn't cut off the leaves, and this is the finished. This is the de-leafed version, which is what you'd want to do if you're sticking it in the fridge for a couple of days. Even, stashing it in your car and bringing it home for a whole day or something. You don't want these things, leaves on the stem.
Today for 10 minutes.
Yeah, really. It starts wilting immediately in 100-degree weather. So I de-leafed these last night, and that makes this piece of wood last a lot longer. So I can even put this in the fridge for a week and have no problem at all. It could be done in a week, even 2 weeks. This wood is quite firm. It's not quite as dormant wood, but it's darn close. And that is the value of prunus wood. Prunus starts really early and grows really fast. Some of these shoots were 4 to 5 feet long.
So species.
Any species.
What species is it especially good for due to, various circumstances?
Well,
that
I
make
think
them
it's very
difficult
good
to
for
graft?
peach because winter and early spring peach budding doesn't always give you success. The thing about peach buds, if you look at a peach bud in the wintertime,
It's just,
they're pretty big. They're sticking out there.
yeah.
And so they actually are much more open to damage just from handling, from the weather.
And desiccation's probably
And
not bad.
desiccation.
Yeah.
Bagged and taken around from one side and exchanged to the other.
Yeah.
So having a fresh stick with fresh buds is the best way to go.
Okay.
You know the buds are good if you're picking it yourself. So I want to just demonstrate a little bit on the cut. The cut's very important. Yeah, so the reference manual of woody plant propagation by Michael Durr. It's state-of-the-art information. Everything is very simply laid out. He describes the chip bud absolutely elegantly. Basically says you strip the leaves off the rootstock stem. You make a 1/8 inch cut on the stalk, 1/8 inch deep at a 20-degree angle. That's the first cut. And the second cut is a 1.5 inch long cut that arcs down. You start above the bud and arc underneath the bud until you hit your first cut. And you do want to use approximately the same size scion.
Pretty close.
Pretty close. It can be smaller. If it's bigger wood than the stock, then you're going to have to make a more shallow cut. It gets a little more difficult. So the bud is everything. You have to examine the buds here. You want to see a bud that's not too elongated, and you want to see a bud that's actually there. It's not blind.
We're going to take a look at some buds here. This is what he would consider ideal. It is well developed and pretty big, but it's real close to the stem here. It's like real flat against the stem, and it only has one leaf scar here where one leaf was cut off. This one has 1, 2, 3 leaf scars, and the bud is elongated, so you can see how the bud is way out here, about 1/8 of an inch away from the stem. This one here, if it has a bud at all, it might have like a little bud tucked way back down in there, and it has these 4. It actually looks like this was maybe a little side branch that got cut off. So that means the bud that was there already grew, and there may be some little dormant buds hiding around in there, but you know, that's definitely not what you want. This one has a very small bud tucked way back in here. It has 1 or 2 or 3 leaf scars, and it's just undersized basically. So if you have a choice to look for this, that doesn't mean that none of these would work in a pinch, and you know, you just try it and it either works or it doesn't. You use what you have. But if you have a choice, you're looking for that in at least peaches and nectarines and almonds.
So this little bud is good. So I've cut the stems, the petioles, the leaf petioles are coming. There's 3 leaf petioles on this axle. So I've cut those back just a little bit, and I'm going to make a 1/8 of an inch deep cut at a 20-degree angle, like that. That's my bird mouth. Then I'm going to start above the bud. And there's my chip right there. This is a little bit ragged. I can clean that up just a little bit. I put a little water on. So we're going to make exactly the same cut that we made on the scion as we do on the stock. So we're going to start, might as well go below a bud just like before, and we're going to cut a 1/8 inch deep, 20-degree angle. This is pretty firm. And I'm going to start at 1.5 inches above. And you can do it again. To get a really good cut on it. I think I want to go one more time on that, just to get a little bit deeper and a little wider. And there's your bird mouth there. Let's see if it lines up or not. So it looks like we're less than 1/8 of an inch, so I'll take a little bit more off the top. So my chip goes right in there like that.
Beautiful.
And I'm going to take my parafilm. We got it. We're going to seat that in there like that, see? Okay, now the parafilm, all you do is just stretch it and pull it. And you just press it with your thumb and it's done. That bud will pop right through. Now, it won't pop through until I cut the stalk. So now we have our time period that we need to wait. So how long is it going to take for that to heal? At this time of year, 21 days maximum. 14 days could be, if it's nice and warm. So between 2 and 3 weeks after I insert the bud, I just cut the top right here 1 inch above the bud, and I force that bud to grow, and it'll pop right through the parafilm and grow 3 feet probably. If the stalk is in good condition,
And
it'll
you're
grow
taking
3
good
feet.
care of it and pushing it hard.
Yeah, which is all about the stalk.
And even
Watering
if the
it
tree was slowing down growth, it's going to reboot and like it's starting over for the year. Because
Well, you want to trick the tree
you wanna
into
trick
thinking
it
it's
into
still
thinking
growing.
yeah.
Yeah, and this is where the season is kind of important.
Right.
I found in this climate zone, we still are in full-on growth right now. If you look at these peach trees, they are really, really beautiful, lush growth right now. They're not quite slowing down. It takes about another month to slow down. So that's why July is really nice here. We got a nice long season, and as long as that's in grow mode, it'll keep pushing till the end. It'll act just like that's the tree. If you wait a month and try to chip bud in a month, it's possible that even when you cut the stalk, it will not force it, because the plant knows that it's getting late in the season. So that's why July is actually the perfect month for it. You might be able to do it, especially if you're watering, fertilizing.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You could probably trick the plant.
The other thing to do is just hit it as soon as you cut it, or right before, actually hit it with fertilizer and water.
Yeah. Take that right there and just make a little slit and just roll back the parafilm a little bit and see if you can see some callus tissue, which is the bridging tissue between the stalk and the scion. If you can see a little bit of bridging callus tissue right in there, right in that little bird mouth wedge, you could go for it. Yeah.
But approximately, if you had to give people a number,
I'd wait 20 days to be sure.
Okay.
Yeah. If you feel like you're a little bit late in the season, cut it a little sooner. Try to get that bud to push. That way you know you've got a tree. It's not so important to get a lot of feet of growth. Even a couple inches is fine. You know you got the tree then. It takes just a little bit of repetition. You saw that I cut a little short, and so you can redo a little bit. Sometimes your chip just doesn't turn out right. Fine. Look how many chips I have on this stick.
Yeah.
You know, I can immediately cut a chip out of here. I cut a chip out of here.
Can you point out to people that aren't already familiar with grafting what the cambium is and why the cambial lineup is important?
So this is your wood right here. That's actually dead. It's being created by the cambium, which is this green edge on either side. So you really want those cambiums to touch in order.
So it's not the bark, it's not the wood.
It's not the bark. There's very little beauty of this young a wood is there's almost no bark here. It's almost pure cambium, and that's the beauty of this teenage wood. It's the bark. It's almost invisible. Just the very darkest green line is the bark. But the cambium, relative to the size of the stem, is pretty large at this point on this young wood, which is why we use this young wood.
Right.
Basically, current season's wood that's well grown.
And it's actively laying down wood on one side and it's laying down bark on the other side.
Right, because there's two actual different parts of the cambium. One makes the wood cells on the inside, the other makes the bark cells.
The cambium's where the magic is, and it's just that thin layer between the wood and the bark, and that's why you need that to line up between the stalk and the budwood.
Yeah. Now, in theory, if if your stalk is way bigger, you'd have to move your bud over to one side.
Or cut less deeply, correct?
Or try to cut less deeply if you can, yeah. So just by playing with this, you can
if the width
adjust it.
Even if the stalks aren't the same, if the width of the cut is the same, you should get a decent contact. But yeah, if you have to move it to one side.
Well, the problem though with that is that the larger stalk, the bark is going to be thicker than the bark on this, so you can't actually just line up the edge.
Right, look at the cambium.
You have to really, and it gets a little tricky.
Yep.
That's why having grafting the same age wood is really handy, because the bark is about the same thickness.
That's the problem we have with grafting into older wood is, with
really lining up the cambiums.
Is really getting the cambium lined up. You're almost guessing some of the time.
Yeah. And that's why sometimes you cheat a little and even put it at a bit of an angle. You put the scion in a little bit of an angle so you make sure you cover the territory. Yeah, you're crossing somewhere. So I'm using parafilm M. Now, what they call grafting parafilm is parafilm F. I wouldn't use it. It's too thick. I don't think that it's really worth much. The parafilm M is very thin and very stretchable, and that's the stuff you really want for budding. And you can see, here's the parafilm M. I've cut this parafilm M into 1-inch strips by 6 inches long. So I want to just show you how easy this is to stretch. You see how stretchy that is? It's quite amazing stuff.
Excellent. When you cut that off, where exactly are you going to?
I'll go approximately an inch above the wood. So I had almost of a 3/4 of an inch above the bud, And so I'd go another 1/4 inch, so I'd cut it off right about there. It
If there
doesn't.
were any other adventitious buds there, would you pick those out?
I would you disbud. Yeah. Yeah. You can, yeah, by cutting off the stalk, some of these may shoot later on. But the beauty of budding is that you're not going to get any growth below the bud while it's healing. The plant is in full-on mode. The leaves are sending down food. The stalk is sending up water, and nutrients from the soil. And all those nutrients are just flowing by the bud. The bud is hardly impacting that at all. It's not, you haven't cut through the stem.
Right.
So there's no impasse.
Unlike
So that's why the
water dormant
healing is
graft.
really fast. The healing can be 7 to 14 days if everything's growing really quickly. So the chip bud works beautifully on olive. Really, really nice graft. And olive wood, of course, is wonderful to work with. So this was a chip bud that was done on the Sevi olive, a local specimen that we all know about that's famous, and it's the most beautiful tree any of us have ever seen.
I have picked olives off there the size of plums.
Yeah.
Incredible.
They're-
I have pictures.
They're going for it.
I have pictures of quart jars full of those olives, and
Yeah.
it looks like the jars are pint jars
All right.
because the olives are so big.
Yeah. This is the bud was done right here. This is where I placed the bud. Here's where I cut off the stalk right there. There's the old stalk that was cut off. And so that bud shot out of there, shot through the parafilm and grew up, and now I'm training it into a tree. And you notice there's nothing going below either, so it's really happy. It's a happy graft. I haven't had to take anything off underneath
suckers,
here.
yeah.
There's no suckers. So no suckers means you have a really good graft. The graft itself is flowing all that sap.
Right. It's content to grow the top and not
Yeah,
not the
and so
roots.
that's kind of proof that you've done a good job. And that is the beauty of budding, and that's why most California nurseries, almost all trees that you buy, bare root trees, are budded. They're not necessarily chip budded, but they're budded. And that's because, in truth, that union is really clean. It's very small. Very seldom is there any damage to that. It's not gnarly and contorted.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Yep. The art of picking scion wood. There's not a lot of good wood on this tree right now. Like if I go to that Sevi, I bring my 6 or 8 foot ladder and my 7-foot picker, and I'm looking for just the ones that are shooting off of an arching stem.
Up.
Because they're going
In other words, you want the biggest, vigorous,
vertical
vertical,
stem.
fast-growing gnashing
Yeah.
growth.
Yeah. See, that doesn't have so many side shoots, so you're actually getting the older wood here. That's a beautiful bud. That's a really beautiful bud.
Okay.
Perfect. It's only got 1 leaf, too, not 3. It's a prima bud. There's a lot of energy in that bud. And the lower bud is really the winner. Yeah, see, for some reason, this particular branch has a lot of good wood on it. Yeah, below the bush. Yeah, see it bushes out up here.
That one.
You want below the bush. Yeah, lots of good wood.
Okay.
Smoky.
Smoke.
I call him tail boy. I call him all kinds of shit. It's disgustingly sweet.
Spiny. It's just pure sugar, no flavor
Yeah.
at all.
And there's a lot of seeds in it, and it's definitely edible, but there's not much to it.
I'm pretty sure how this works is it's pollinated by bats or maybe large moths or something, and these are the pollen-bearing things here, and they're not releasing pollen yet, but they probably will within like an hour. And when the bat or whatever flies in here, it pushes on this, which is what you pollinate. This is the female part. So it goes in here and it pushes down, and it gets the pollen from these guys all over its breast, and it leaves pollen from previous, cactus on the girl parts. I always forget what they're called.
Pistil.
Pistil, thank you.
Pistils.
So Mark's shown us his melon patch vertically oriented here, and these are Heogen, right?
Yeah.
That's where I got my Heogen seed is from you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those are big too.
They're moving right along, and as they move up, see how many are set here?
Right,
I don't know.
this will produce a second crop in September.
It appeared. Look at this.
Yep.
Look at that. I don't know.
Wow.
What am I going to get? 100 fruit off of this?
Man, if you're in the tropics, boy. Yeah, you're not going to get that many because you're going to.
Well, okay, 50.
You're going to run out of time.
Yeah.
Maybe you could throw a greenhouse over it.
And then we have Persian cucumbers here.
Oh, you eat those, huh?
Oh my God, these are good. Oh, these are so good.
Oh, I was thinking of Armenian.
Oh
Different.
no, the Persian. Oh yeah, these are the best. The best fresh cucumber for sure.
Cool. Can I take that and try?
Oh yeah,
Excellent.
it's really wonderful. So good on sandwiches.
Dang, those are bright.
They are bright.
That's like a real retina.
This
retina
is
burner.
great. It's great.
And these are.
Dahlias.
Is it a tree dahlia or just a regular?
It's a regular. It's a regular.
big.
It's just not a dwarf.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that.
I'm needing to bed, yeah. We got a lot more blooms coming here.
Wow, these are crazy. This cactus is amazing. Look at that thing. And it has really cool little pink flowers on it.
It does for like 6 months out of the year.
Really?
Yeah.
God, it just gets better and better.
October, November,
Well, whenever
December, January, February, March. Yep.
if you ever get a pup off that, I definitely will.
Yeah, I'll get a pup one of these days. Isn't that weird?
You didn't graft that?
No.
Really? That just started growing?
Yeah.
Wow, it unmutated.
That particular little stem.
It mutated back to normal.
It'll probably start mutating again, but
Whoa. That is weird.
is that strange?
Why would it do that?
I've seen them do that before. For a little while, they decide to go straight.
Crazy. Look at this thing.